An investigation is underway after someone vandalized Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's campaign office in the Bronx.
Yeah, someone dumped red paint on the roll-down gate with a sign that says AOC funds genocide in Gaza. Eyewitness News anchor Joe Torres is live in Westchester Square with more on that investigation. Joe.
Lauren, there is considerable and widespread agreement here in Westchester Square that no matter what political position you might have, your stance, what side of the aisle, if you're looking to make a statement, this is not the way to do it, through vandalism and the defacing of public property. According to police, it was about 12:40 this morning when this vandalism happened. And
it all started with red paint splattered across a metal gate in the Bronx. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's campaign office had just been vandalized. A message was scrawled across it: AOC funds genocide in Gaza. This wasn't an attack from Republicans or some far-right group. No, this came from her own side. Progressive Democrats, once her biggest fans, had officially turned on her. And not quietly. They stormed her town hall, heckled her, and even shouted she was a war criminal.
Really hard to defend and I know what you're doing about the genocide in Gaza. You're a war
Yes, you heard that right. How did AOC go from being the face of the progressive movement to being publicly humiliated by her own supporters? The answer lies in a vote, one single vote that lit a fire under the already fractured Democratic Party. By the way, before we continue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow and share more intriguing stories. Now let's continue.
What do you say? I have a question. What do you say about politicians that constantly reaffirm Israel's right to exist? Because people like me are constantly attacked by politicians for standing up for Palestine, and you are constantly defending the right for Israel to exist. My family is in Palestine right now, constantly under attack, and I'm hearing you say free Palestine, but also Israel has the right to exist. Don't be hypocritical. Don't be hypocritical and say free Palestine when you're also defending the right for Israel to exist. It does not have the right to exist. It does not have the right to exist. It's not your land to say it has the right to exist.
Woo! AOC's fall from grace wasn't random. It was triggered by a bold political move that came from the most unexpected place. And once you see how this unfolded, you'll understand why it's being called one of the most brutal betrayals in modern party politics. From being the untouchable poster child of progressives to being treated like a traitor, AOC's situation reveals just how unstable the foundation of the Democrat Party has become. What happened next will blow your mind. The spark that ignited this political firestorm came from none other than Marjorie Taylor Greene. Yes, the same woman Democrats love to mock suddenly pulled off one of the most strategic political traps in recent memory.
A couple years ago, there was a vote in Congress for funding for the Iron Dome, and you very publicly were torn, even emotional about your vote, which ultimately was present. You put out a statement saying that you opposed Iron Dome funding. Would you vote for it today?
And to be clear, at that time I had voted present on the Iron Dome funding because of what we had seen previously that year in terms of Netanyahu's decisions, which also resulted in the bombing of several buildings that contained media agencies, civilian targets. However, I do think that in this present moment, when we discuss support for Israeli defense systems, that is absolutely legitimate. I think it is absolutely something that whose support we can
you would vote yes.
She introduced a bill that had zero chance of passing a completely symbolic amendment that called for defunding Israel's Iron Dome, which cost the U.S. around $500 million a year. Now, here's the genius part. Greene knew exactly how this would mess with the Democrats. She knew they hate Israel, or at least many in their base believe Israel is committing genocide. But they also hate MAGA Republicans. So what happens when a MAGA Republican puts forward a bill that aligns with the most radical wing of the Democratic base? Do they vote for it and side with someone they call a fascist? Or do they vote against it and look like hypocrites? It was a trap, plain and simple, and AOC walked right into it. She voted against the amendment, yes, against defunding Israel's missile defense. To many on the far left, that vote felt like betrayal. It wasn't just a disagreement. It was proof, in their eyes, that she was no longer one of them. That vote exposed a crack in her identity. Suddenly, she wasn't the fearless revolutionary anymore. She was just another Democrat trying to survive politically, and the backlash wasn't just online, it was visceral, loud, and very, very public. After that vote, the backlash exploded like gasoline on fire. Progressive activists, the very people who once championed AOC as a revolutionary voice, turned her into a villain overnight. Social media became a war zone. X, formerly Twitter, was filled with accusations, outrage, and disgust. And the criticism wasn't vague, it was razor sharp. One user compared her support for the Iron Dome to handing a mass shooter a bulletproof vest. Another called her out for siding with liberal Zionist lobbyists and ignoring the Palestinian people. People weren't just angry, they felt betrayed. They pointed out that if she truly believed Israel was committing genocide, then voting to protect its missile system was complicity. They didn't care that the amendment wouldn't pass. To them, this was about principle, not politics. And these weren't trolls or bots. These were longtime AOC supporters, the ones who celebrated her rise, backed her campaigns, and defended her at every turn. They now saw her as part of the establishment, someone who says one thing and votes another. That vote didn't just make them question her politics, it made them question her identity. Is she still the radical she claimed to be? Or is she now just another player in a dirty, two-faced game? The message was clear. To the far left, there's no room for nuance. You're either all in or you're the enemy. And AOC, in their eyes, had switched sides. So AOC did what she always does. When under fire, she went online and tried to explain herself. She posted a long defense of her vote, saying the amendment was misleading. According to her, it didn't actually stop offensive aid to Israel. It only targeted the Iron Dome, which she claimed was a defensive system. And more importantly, she said, it did nothing to halt the flow of US bombs being used in Gaza. She insisted she was staying true to her values, arguing that cutting Iron Dome funding while still allowing lethal weapons to flow into the region wouldn't solve anything. In her words, the amendment was performative. She even threw in a jab. If you're saying I voted for military funding, you are lying. She told critics to Google it, but that response only added fuel to the fire. Her followers weren't buying it. They accused her of hiding behind technicalities. One person pointed out that Iron Dome isn't some harmless shield, it allows Israel to operate with impunity, knowing incoming missiles will be intercepted. Others said that even a symbolic vote against Israel would have sent a powerful message, but AOC didn't take the stand they were demanding. Worse, her tone online came off as smug, even combative. She wasn't calming anyone down, she was pouring salt in the wound. Instead of clarifying, she looked like she was doubling down. And when she implied that voting with Marjorie Taylor Greene meant aligning with neo-Nazis, it made things even messier. Because now, it wasn't just about the vote, it was about her judgment, her loyalty, and her willingness to call her own colleagues extremists. And just when it seemed like things couldn't spiral further, oh, they did. Her attempt to distance herself from Greene backfired big time. People weren't just mad about the vote anymore. They were mad about the way she was trying to dodge accountability. One reply said, "Are you calling your own progressive colleagues neo-Nazis now?" Because remember, others in the squad did vote to defund the Iron Dome. Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Summer Lee, they all backed the amendment. So when AOC framed it as siding with extremists, it sounded like she was throwing them under the bus too. Progressives were livid. The message was loud and clear. You didn't just betray the cause, you betrayed your allies. One tweet summed it up perfectly. You got cooked so hard that you united the entire left against you. That kind of blow doesn't come from right-wing trolls. It comes from people who once knocked doors for her campaign, who called her a movement, not just a politician. And then came the final slap in the face. Ilhan Omar herself, yes, a fellow squad member retweeted a post dragging AOC's vote. That's not just disagreement, that's open disapproval. Public, direct, no attempt to hide it. The post listed the names of the few Democrats who stood with Green on the amendment, and AOC's name wasn't one of them. Her own allies were signaling she'd lost the plot. At this point, it wasn't just a rough week, it was political exile. That moment when Ilhan Omar shared that tweet wasn't just petty drama. It was a declaration. The squad, the same crew that once moved as one, was now fractured. And the tweet Omar shared wasn't random. It listed the only 5 members of Congress who voted with Marjorie Taylor Greene to strip the $500 million in Iron Dome funding: Thomas Massie, Al Green, Summer Lee, Rashida Tlaib, and Omar herself. AOC's name was not on that list. Think about that. The woman once seen as the most radical, most uncompromising progressive in the House wasn't radical enough. And the message from Omar was simple: you're not with us anymore. The most stinging part? The bill was never going to pass. Everyone knew that. So it wasn't about outcomes. It was about symbolism, a chance to show solidarity with Palestine. A statement against U.S. military funding for a government accused of committing war crimes. A chance to take a stand, even if it meant aligning with someone like Green. But AOC didn't. And that told the leftist base everything they needed to know. That when push came to shove, she wouldn't risk her political standing to make a symbolic gesture. That she'd rather protect her brand than make a bold move. And to them, that meant she was just another politician playing it safe while Gaza burns. Things only got uglier from there. Just days after the vote, AOC held a town hall in New York, hoping to reconnect with her community. Instead, she got ambushed. Angry voices shouted from the audience. One man stood up and screamed, "You're a war criminal!" The room clapped. It wasn't an isolated outburst, it was a boiling over of frustration. These weren't conservatives crashing her event. These were her people, progressive, pro-Palestinian activists who once saw her as a hero. This wasn't politics anymore, it was personal. They weren't just accusing her of making a bad decision, they were accusing her of selling out, of abandoning the values she claimed to represent, of hiding behind technical arguments while people in Gaza were dying. The chants, the shouts, the rage, they weren't just about one vote. They were about years of expectations crashing into one moment of disillusionment. And it didn't stop with AOC. Another progressive darling, Zorhan Mamdani, was also attacked verbally by a furious activist demanding to know why he would say, "Free Palestine," while still acknowledging Israel's right to exist. The protester yelled, "Israel has no right to exist!" And that one line captured the growing divide. Because for the most radical activists, anything short of calling for the total dismantling of Israel is a betrayal. There's no middle ground. You either want it gone or you're the enemy. And AOC, by trying to walk that line, ended up getting crushed under it. And here's where the real danger of all this comes into focus. Because it's not just about a vote, or one angry crowd, or a few bad headlines. What's happening to AOC is part of a much bigger crisis inside the Democratic Party. The most radical voices, the ones who once operated on the fringe, are now calling the shots. These aren't just people with loud opinions online. They're the ones organizing protests, shaping narratives, and pushing politicians into extreme corners. And when those politicians don't go far enough, they're torn apart. We're talking about activists who genuinely believe that acknowledging Israel's right to exist is itself an act of violence. That supporting a defensive missile system like the Iron Dome makes you a war criminal. That if you aren't fully demanding the destruction of Israel and the collapse of Western systems, you're not radical enough. That's what AOC is now up against. Because when she tries to explain, "Look, I support Palestinian rights, but I also support Israel's right to exist," Her base hears betrayal. They don't care about nuance. They don't want diplomacy. They want elimination of Israel, of capitalism, of the old systems, and anything less than that is treated like siding with the enemy. So it's no surprise that when AOC tries to thread the needle vote one way, talk another, the people she once represented see it as pure hypocrisy. And they're making it very clear. They're not waiting around for her to catch up. Then came the clip that sent everything into overdrive. An old interview resurfaced AOC on CNN, sitting calmly, answering a question about her vote on Iron Dome funding. The anchor asked if she'd vote the same way today. And with zero hesitation, AOC said yes. Not only that, she defended funding for Israeli defense systems, calling it legitimate. Just like that, the last threads holding her to the radical base snapped. For the activists who already felt betrayed, this was confirmation. She wasn't confused, she wasn't pressured. This was her real stance. She believes Israel deserves to be defended. And to those who've spent months, and in some cases years, calling Israel an apartheid state and accusing it of genocide, that position is unforgivable. It didn't matter that she used softer language. It didn't matter that she still criticized Netanyahu or mentioned past bombings. All they heard was, "I support Israel's defense." That was enough. Her critics immediately pounced. They didn't just accuse her of complicity, they painted her as an active supporter of oppression. Some even said she'd sold out completely, now just another cog in the pro-Israel establishment machine. And in that moment, something became crystal clear. This wasn't just a policy disagreement anymore. This was a war over identity, over ideology, over who gets to lead the progressive movement. And AOC, once the queen of that movement, was suddenly being dethroned by the very people who helped put her there. While all this chaos unfolded, Democrats tried to pretend everything was under control. They pushed out polls, claiming Donald Trump's approval was underwater, trying to shift focus. But behind the scenes, the party was crumbling. AOC's collapse wasn't just bad optics, it was a warning siren. If even she couldn't survive the wrath of the radical base, who could? Everywhere you looked, the cracks were spreading. In the last election, every single county in America except 2 shifted more to the right. That's not an accident, that's a reaction. While Democrats chased niche ideology and doubled down on culture wars, the average voter, especially in places like Pennsylvania and Georgia, was moving the other way. The left looked at victories in deep blue cities like New York and thought, this is the future. But they forgot something critical. Most of America isn't New York. It's not filled with people demanding socialism or chanting for the end of Israel. Yet those are the voices now dominating the conversation. And there's no one in charge to pull the brakes. No leadership, no vision, just noise. The radicals are filling the vacuum and the moderates are too scared or too weak to stop them. So while voters might not love Trump, they're looking at Democrats and thinking, at least he seems serious. Because what's the alternative? A party that turns on its own, eats its own, and forces out its stars the second they show any sign of reason or restraint? AOC's fall made one thing brutally clear. The Democratic Party has lost control of its own monster. And that brings us to the final nail in the coffin, what AOC's downfall really means for the future of the Democratic Party. Once the radical left starts turning on their biggest icons, the entire structure begins to collapse. We're not just talking about anonymous Twitter fights or protests outside of events. This is open war within the party. Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, they were already getting heat from the far left. But now, even AOC is being cast out. That's not just a warning shot. That's a full-blown mutiny. AOC was never supposed to be the enemy. She was the future, the rising star, the one who wore designer suits to Congress while quoting Karl Marx and calling for the end of capitalism. She was supposed to be untouchable, but that illusion shattered the moment she didn't go radical enough. One vote on a bill that never had a chance of passing, and suddenly she was just another establishment sellout. At that infamous town hall, when she got called a war criminal to her face, you could see it. The fall was complete. And now, the radicals want to replace her with someone louder, angrier, and more extreme. Because the new progressive test isn't policy, it's purity. And if AOC failed it, no one's safe. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Also, drop your thoughts in the comments. See you on the next one.